Hello! Welcome to the first and, let's be honest, quite probably only episode of a new show I like to call Lockdown Lumber. A brand new show where, as the title suggests, I spend my time in lockdown seeing what I can build from any spare bits of lumber I find lying around the shed, the garden or the attic. This week I try and turn a knackered old pallet from the garden and a slightly less knackered smaller pallet from the attic into, just using the materials I have laying around the house, a functioning coffee table. Basically, it's a video of me sawing things, hammering things and sanding things, so if that's not your vibe, probably give it a skip. If it is, oh, strap in. So the first thing I needed to do, obviously, was to dismantle the pallet from the garden. I didn't necessarily have a clear idea at this stage what the finished design of the table would look like, so at this point it's just a case of collecting all of the usable pieces and seeing what you've got to play with. Some of these nails were really tough to get out, actually. I guess they'd been in there a long time. Well, of course they had. I'd started to think by this stage that these blocks attached to the planks here would be really useful to use as the legs of the finished table, so I took all of those off and kept them all. Some of the nails I couldn't get out at all, so I had to saw them down with the hacksaw there. Just make sure that there was nothing left sticking out. And then once I had all the pieces, all the blocks here, all the planks, I could start to think about what the design might be. But before that, of course, a lot of that wood was pretty rough, so that needed sanding down. I actually forgot I had the electric sander in the attic, so I gave the planks another once over with that. Then it was a case of also sanding down the small pallet. I knew I was going to use it in its entirety. At one point I thought this might be the top of the table, but as I started taking the other planks apart, I realised they were much more aesthetically pleasing, so this is me cutting down a couple of planks to form the base to be the bottom part of the legs of the table. And once both those were done, the palette sat very nicely on top. So it was then up to the attic, and a question of attaching those to the bottom of the pallet. I realised at this stage that the pallet itself wasn't held together particularly well, so I decided to add a few nails into it to make it more sturdy. I'm using one of the blocks and a wedge here just so that I didn't split the wood that I was hammering into. And then I had to add more blocks to the top of the pallet to be the base for the top layer of the table. Luckily I had these really long nails because I wasn't sure quite how I would attach them otherwise. So I had to go all the way through these blocks to then add them to the top of the what would become the lower level pallet. And then it was a case of cutting all the other planks down to the same length to be the tabletop. Just getting rid of the worst edges, the bits that are most split. Another bit of sanding. You can never sand something too much. Said no one ever. And now this is me deciding which side of each plank is the most aesthetically pleasing, but also will provide the flattest surface area. And once I've decided that, I can nail all those planks into one I've attached across the top blocks. I realised that some of the nails I'd added to the newer pallet to make it more sturdy had actually come through the bottom, so I then needed to file those nails down to make sure everything was nice and smooth and wasn't going to catch when the table was in use. And with that done, the table was ready for treatment. A lot of people would use oil. I had some cans of varnish up in the attic, so those were what I had to use. It's actually my least favourite stage of the whole process. I like the construction. I find this sort of thing quite tedious. I think I did about 3 coats on the underside and on the top side. And here it is, all finished, in situ. Thanks very much for sticking with it all the way to the end. I hope it helped pass a bit of time during your lockdown. I know making this has certainly helped pass the time for me. If this lockdown goes on for another few weeks, maybe there'll be a second episode. In the meantime, stay safe, stay inside, and thanks for watching Lockdown Lumber.